Hi, it's me. Welcome. On the list today is the beautiful tactical frog. Chronograph. Beyond that, I want to talk about these. I never really gave this one the full video that it deserved because I knew that there was a second batch coming that was going to introduce some changes, like fixing the pivot. But there's more than that that has been changed on the Batch 1 versus the brand spanking Batch 2. Ones I'm not entirely sure that is for the better, and one that is definitely for the better. First off, beyond the visual difference, this is the correct orientation for the pivot logo. I kind of wish they kept it this way to identify it as the clone versus the replica, but it makes it real easy to, at least right now, identify Batch 1 and Batch 2. You can see that the tolerances are better on the Batch 2 for that captured pivot head. The blades are damn near identical, except for the thinness or the deepness of the hollow grind. There you go. I have not measured the Batch 2 yet, but I will very shortly. The Batch 1 on the left, mine measures 9 thousandths at the heel. And the Batch 2 here is 10. Where does it start dropping? Sorry guys, gotta go off camera so I can actually find the behind the edge. I did not prepare for this other than getting the knives ready. 10.5 thou behind the edge. And that extra 1.5 thou is a big difference. It doesn't really make the blade heavier at all. Really much at all. But it's going to definitely change how I feel about the blade. The Batch 1, I know that there's at least one reported incident of it cracking and failing at the heel. That should really not happen on the Batch 2. It is meatier. 1.5 thou does not seem like a whole big difference, but it really is a huge, huge difference in thickness. It's going to make the Batch 2 blade a lot more robust. It's going to make it easier to sharpen and strop, because you're not going to be worried about bending the blade and cracking it. It's also going to give you a little more assurance while in use that although still very thin, it's not that far off what we see on other knives from Jufule. Whatever manufacturer they're getting to do this, which is either Tucson or Sanremo. They have kept the T8 hardware for the pivot, the screws, as well as the internal screws. They have changed slightly the milling on the lock bar. On the Batch 2, it goes like so. You can see here, it's, I guess, I'm going to call that lengthwise. And on the Batch 1, it's the other way. And it is there. You can see it like that on the inside of the lock bar, and it is much deeper on the Batch 1. The Batch 2's lock bar tab is much slipperier, because that milling is so fine it might as well be smooth. The adjustment pins on the Batch 2 on mine were not Loctited, which made adjusting this one just orders of magnitude easier. But the detent ball is bigger on the Batch 2 than on the Batch 1. And they didn't adjust the geometry of the detent hole in the blade, which has an issue. So, taking these apart, I'm going to show you the blades. Now, the disassembly for these two is pretty much exactly the same. The lock bar is pretty much exactly the same, except for the size of that detent ball. And that makes all the difference in tuning your action. The Batch 1 has a better detent because the ball sits in the blade hole, in the detent hole on the blade better. It matches it more correctly. Oops. Than on the Batch 2. They have the exact same bearings. I'm going to wipe them down so they're not as ugly on camera. Off. Batch 1 blade, Batch 2 blade. The detent ramp. Now, I have not removed the nub on the Batch 2. I have on the Batch 1. You can see the geometry there is one's a little longer than the other. The detent ramp is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same between the two of them. The Batch 2 seems to be a little steeper ramp than the Batch 1. Again, Batch 1 left, Batch 2 right. And it's not as deep. Flipping them over, you see the stop and closed, the open and closed position pins are, I believe they're identical. They're better seated in the Batch 2 blade than in the Batch 1. My Batch 1 blade, this stop pin here for the closed position is a little bit deeper than the other pin, and it made adjusting this so bad that once I did finally get the adjustment screw out, I couldn't get it back in. But that's okay. I like a strong detent on my knives anyway. And it just so happened that, well, that's where I wanted it to be anyway. So no real harm or foul there on the Batch 1. The Batch 2, these pins are seated much better. They're both pretty much the same height. They're pretty well positioned. And again, that screw there is not Loctited in. And you see how that pin is not protruding past the face of the flat of that pin. That's what I mean by all the way in. When I say it's screwed all the way in, you can't adjust past that point. Now, there's a user on Reddit that I advised not to file this down to get a better detent. I'm going to advise that that user actually do that. Seeing how this arrangement is set up now, that particular arrangement on the batch 2 with the considerably larger detent ball, that adjustment screw is almost useless on the batch 2 currently, with the amount of lock bar pressure that I like. And the lock bar pressure between the two of them is much different. I've actually added pressure on the batch 2 and removed a whole lot of pressure on the batch 1. You can see there where they rest compared to each other. And what I'm looking specifically at, if you would fucking focus, camera, is, let's try something non-magnetic, is behind here. This little piece that is part of the lock bar cutout, this is what I'm judging and measuring my lock bar pressure. It's just the tiniest sliver on the batch 1. And it is considerably more on the batch 2. I'm going to do my best here to get an actual measurement currently. Because this is a spring, it's very hard to get an actual measurement here. But what I'm doing here is I'm measuring from the flat of the outside of the scale to how much that protrudes, trying not to compress the lock bar. And it's about 3.71 millimeters for the batch 2. For the action currently, to pretty much match the tuned action on the batch 1, and the batch 1 being this is such a fiddly fucking process, so bear with me. We're doing it in real time here. .6. No. 3.5. 3.55. 3.55 millimeters from the flat of the outside of the scale to this point here on this flat behind the interface, behind the protruding part. 3.5, 3.55. For that. And again, it was what, 3.6? .6, 3.65 for the batch 2. Mine came to me at about 3.5-ish. It was a little less than this lock bar pressure. And this is where the disappointment is the detent ball. If they had kept the detent ball the exact same size, it would have made the tuning the same as the batch 1. But because the detent ball in the batch 2 is so much larger, it doesn't fall directly into that detent hole when the pin is screwed up, when the adjustment screw is all the way in. Which means that there's a maximum amount of detent strength that you can apply to this knife without modification. Actual modification, removing metal. And that modification would be done on this particular pin surface. You would take your diamond flat and flatten that flat surface there more to allow the blade to close a little tiny bit more in the closed position to allow that detent ball to engage deeper into the detent hole on the blade. After this video, I'm going to slowly and methodically make that adjustment to get the detent strength that I want while keeping this setting here for my lock bar pressure at about 3.6, 3.65 millimeters measured again from the outside flat of the scale to this surface here, right there. Steel Addicted did a adjustment and tuning video, and it's very, very good. He measured the grub screw size, and I believe he said 1.5 millimeter for the grub screw. The hex key, it's either 1.3 or 1.5. I don't have either of those, but I do have this ultra cheap eyeglass flat screwdriver that I have sanded down to about 1.3, 1.4 millimeter this way, and that allows me to stick that in there and turn that screw. And on the batch 2, it's very easy. You can see no thread locker, no Loctite. I'm not using any pressure. I'm not pushing. I'm just getting it in there. It's wedging a little bit and I'm turning. If you do this on yours and you have to apply a whole hell of a lot of pressure, be careful that you don't strip this grub screw, because you'll round it out on the inside and then it will be a fucking son of a bitch to get out. That's what I did on this, on the batch 1. Because it was Loctited, that screw did not want to move, and I didn't know it was Loctited. I just thought it was tight. And then I spent 2 hours getting that fucking grub screw out. Don't be like me. Take your time. If that screw does not move, apply some heat. Get a heat gun and heat up that that area, and to release any kind of thread locker or glue that they use to secure that grub screw in place. If you have to really gronk on it, don't. It's not a case of if brute force is not working, you're not using enough of it. It's a case of if you have to apply any more than just a little bit of finger pressure to get that thing to move, stop and heat it up before you proceed to fuck it up. Okay? That's the physical comparison between the two. And I'm going to put them back together now and show you a little bit more in depth the action between the two. Now for oiling, all I did was put a little bit of oil on my fingers. Super lube. And that kind of thing. Just run it between my fingers. And because I wiped off this blade, I'm going to have to re-oil the detent ball path. That's it. That's really all you need. Alternatively, and what you can do is throw a little dot of oil and lubrication onto the detent ball. Just make it shiny. I probably applied it too much, but there you go. And these go together very, very easily. They come apart very, very easily. Only tighten your pivot down to the point where you don't get blade play left to right. But only do that adjustment after you get the backside scale screw in. And get that fucker tight. Hand tight. I have side to side play, so tighten that a little more. No more side to side play. And I fucked up. I didn't put that grub screw back all the way. And you can see what effect that grub screw has. Use this as a teaching lesson. So let's do that. do a little bit of unfucking my fuck up. There we go. It is no longer protruding past the flat of the closed position stop pin. Now, one of you saw me do that, and you didn't say a fucking thing. I didn't hear anybody say, "Hey, stop. You're about to fuck up massively." Shame on you guys. Shame. Pivot is still too tight. Now, I had to put some Loctite on the pivot screw because it likes to walk. You think you get it to a right position, you flip it a couple of times, and then it's walked out again. And then you're in this perpetual hell of trying to find the right position. So just put the tiniest amount of thread locker blue onto the threads just to keep it from walking backwards. Voila, batch 2 done. Now I'm gonna have to re-oil batch 1 as well. Come here. Get over here. Much stronger adjustable detent on the batch 1 than on the batch 2. And you can see where I have no pin, which means essentially on this one the screw is screwed all the way in. So I have no grub screw in here, and essentially the same setup here. The screw is behind the flat interface, and the blade still sits higher closed. You see more, I'm going to call that the nose. You see more nose on the Batch 2 than on the Batch 1 when it's fully adjusted in for the strongest detent. And right now this one is acceptable. The detent is acceptable. It's still on the lighter side. It can be shaken open. Meanwhile, on the Batch 1, I have to almost throw the damn thing to get it to open. Like, you have to really whip it. This one's a lot easier because that detent ball is bigger and it doesn't engage in the hole for the blade as much. You see there? There's a lot of ball still there out of the detent hole. Compare that to the Batch 1, which is fully adjusted for detent strength. There is no room. That ball is fully seated in the hole. The actual lock bar, I believe, is touching the blade because the ball is fully seated in the hole. So if you take material off of that closed position stop pin, that will allow the blade to close a little bit more to allow that ball to fall deeper into the hole to give you a stronger detent without having to add lock bar pressure. But as of right now, this is about the best I can get this thing to be running without doing that permanent modification. And after doing that permanent modification, actually, that adjustment screw will mean something on the Batch 2. Like it does mean something on the Batch 1. You could just hear it too. It just comes out with so much more authority on the Batch 1, even though the lock bar pressure is so much lighter. So there you have it. That's about as quick as I can make this video. I'm comparing the generational differences between these two knives. I gave you behind the edge measurements for both blades. I showed you the size of the detent ball that's on the lock bar is much bigger on the Batch 2 than on the Batch 1. They did things to this one that I don't approve of, that require modifications to get it to run on the same kind of level as this one. So there you go. See you in the next one.